Okay, Marcos, teach us the ancient art of winemaking.
Ah, my friend! How fortuitous to run into you in this most intoxicating place! I'd offer you a drink, but for some reason the workers won't let me borrow any of their wine. Cheapskates. Why, I'm Marcos, of course, one of the most successful merchants in all of Greece. You really haven't heard of me? My name is known from Kefalonia to Kos. If you've ever paid money for something, I probably received a percentage. But enough about me. Let's go back to what you're doing here. You know, I once started my own wine business on Kos. It hit a bit of a snag when my investors, three brothers calling themselves the Cerberos, suddenly lost faith in me. But after they had a tragic run-in with a bloodthirsty Misthios, I was able to land on my feet. From then on, the streets of Kos overflowed with wine, and my purse overflowed with drachmae. Very sad about the Cerberus, though. Couldn't have happened to nicer people. As you can probably tell by all the grapes, this is one of Greece's many vineyards. Wine was an essential part of Greek culture, and this tour will take you through how it was made. In addition to being delicious, not to mention lucrative, wine was an important part of Greek economy. I promise I'll meet you at the end of your visit, my friend. See you soon!
Winemaking dates back to the 4th or 3rd millennium BCE. It became widespread in Greece during the Bronze Age, and within centuries the Greeks had refined it further. The first step in the process was always harvesting, where grapes grown on rows of vines were collected by vineyard workers. According to Homer, harvesting was often accompanied by music to give it a more festive atmosphere. Ancient Greek wine mainly came in 3 different varieties: Austeros, Glucathion, and Autokratos. It could be flavored with spices, herbs, resin, and even perfume. It was also much stronger than modern wine, with an alcohol percentage of approximately 16%. Because of this, the drink was mixed with water to make it more palatable. Grapes were dried to maximize the wine's sweetness and prevent it from turning into vinegar. In most vineyards, the drying process involved laying the grapes out on the ground under the heat of the sun, then covering them at night to protect them from accumulating dew. According to Hesiod's poem, Works and Days, the ideal time to dry grapes was 10 days and 10 nights. When they were finally completely dried, the grapes were collected in jars, just as they are today. The Greeks had many methods for crushing the harvested grapes. The most common technique was to use a lenos, a large treading vat where workers stomped on grapes with their feet. Alternatively, the Greeks sometimes crushed the grapes by hand using a strainer, mashed them with a mortar and pestle, or squeezed them using a tool called a sack press. After the grapes were pressed, the resulting juice was poured into large containers called pithoi, where it fermented. Once fully fermented, the wine was filtered through an ethmos, or sack, which separated it from the residual yeast called lees. The wine was then placed in a special storage room. The room was half buried to keep it dry and maintain a consistent temperature of 15 degrees Celsius. These measures ensured the wine wouldn't lose any of its quality before being shipped to market. When the wine was ready to ship, it was poured into storage containers called amphoras. These were smaller than pithoi, which made them easier to ship and display in crowded marketplaces. However, that doesn't mean transporting wine was always a safe endeavor. Sometimes ships carrying amphoras as cargo would be wrecked before making it to their destination, losing hundreds of bottles of wine to the sea.
Ah, my friend, are you drunk with knowledge? I hope you enjoyed yourself learning about all the picking, stumping, and bottling that goes into making Greece's favorite beverage. Maybe if my customers understood how hard winemaking was, they'd agree more with my perfectly reasonable prices. But let's talk about something else, yes? What else can I do for you? You want your intelligence tested? Well, let me tell you, my friend, no one is more qualified for that task than me. Let's get started. What container was used to ship wine to the market? Yes, wine was stored in amphoras during its long journey to market. Here's another question. Which of the following wasn't a type of wine variety? No, Aftokrator was wine of the medium sweet variety. But don't give up yet. Correct! Thasos was an island famous for its vineyards, not a specific type of wine. Just one more question to go, my friend. Which part of the winemaking process created the grape juice necessary for wine? That's the one! The harvested grapes were pressed in a linos, often by the feet of vineyard workers. Just try not to think about that last part whenever you have a cup of wine. You know your wine. You're as good with facts as I am with money, and that's really saying something. Such an enterprising spirit. I like that. Follow me, my friend.
Απόλεσαν τον οίκον, την εστίαν, η πειρατέα τεπερά.
Children. After a baby was born, it was presented to its father, who would then decide its fate. If the child was a girl, or showed signs of a disability, they were occasionally abandoned and left to die. Wealthier families could hire caretakers or employ their slaves as nurses to look after their children. This was a necessary precaution, as children were very susceptible to diseases and illnesses. Education in Greece was reserved for boys and young men. Rich families could hire tutors to teach their daughters skills like reading, but this was not the norm, and girls were mainly taught how to run the household.
Δύναμη ευθυβολήν προσέτει και αν επικοινείται.
Γιατί ο καφής με πίνει μία ανέτη πίρα.
Δύναμη ευθυβολήν.
Jason was the legendary Greek hero who led the Argonauts, a group of adventurers named after their ship, the Argo. Together they set out to steal the magical Golden Fleece, and eventually succeeded in their quest with the help of a sorceress named Medea. Jason married Medea, and the couple eventually settled in the city of Corinth. But the couple's happy ending was short-lived. When Jason met the king of Corinth's daughter, Glauce, he abandoned Medea to seek the princess's hand in marriage. Enraged, Medea gifted Glauce with a dress that was secretly poisoned. Upon wearing the dress, Glauce was burned alive. The ending of the story varies. Either Medea's children were stoned to death as punishment for her murder of Glauce, or Medea herself killed her children as a way of getting revenge on Jason. The legend of Medea was later told in a tragedy by the famous playwright Euripides.
Κίνησε αυτόν.
Let's go get these first. I know they probably don't mean much, but... completion. I can't help it. I'm sorry. Hello, dear. Trees. Eurystheus asked Heracles to bring him the belt of Hippolyta for the 9th labor. It would be offered to his daughter, Admete. The belt was a gift from the god Ares to his daughter Hippolyta, the queen of Amazons, a tribe of woman warriors. With a group of companions, Heracles reached the Myskira, the city in the Black Sea where Hippolyta lived, and convinced the Amazon to give him the belt. However, Hera had spread rumors among the Amazons, so they attacked him. Heracles had no choice but to kill Hippolyta. He then brought the belt back to Eurystheus. Come on, Phobos. Excuse me. Coming through. To produce our merchant boat, we were really pleased to be able to use as reference the remains of the very well-preserved Chierian ship found in 1965. Having this boat replicated with the highest historic fidelity helped us to give life to our beautiful world and to show that there was not only warships sailing in the great ancient Greek sea. Sorry. The banner of Corinthia was inspired by the coinage of Corinth, which depicts Pegasus. Pegasus, the mythical winged horse, was captured in Corinth by Bellerophon near the Pyrrhon fountain. The hero then rode him to defeat the monstrous creature Chimera. When Bellerophon fell from Pegasus while trying to reach Mount Olympus, Zeus gave Pegasus the task of carrying thunderbolts. The god later granted Pegasus the honor of becoming a constellation.
Welcome to Corinth, Wanderer. I have a special visit planned for you today. It's an intimate, informative look into the daily lives of Greek women. It's amazing what women could accomplish while men spend all day trying to out-debate each other at assembly meetings. Their work should be far more appreciated on the whole, but we're going to acknowledge that now. Corinth was one of the largest cities in ancient Greece. It had an estimated population of 90,000 in my times, and much of that population was made up of women. This tour will shine a light on those women and look at how they lived on a day-to-day basis. Look for me when you're done with your visit, and we can discuss things further.
Young girls growing up in ancient Greek cities were usually raised by a nurse. They mostly stayed in the women's quarters of the house, the gunaikon, where they spent their time spinning threads and weaving. While there is not much historical evidence of young girls at play, especially compared to boys, it was still known to happen. For example, an ancient terracotta group depicts two girls playing ephedrismos. This was a competition to see who could strike an upright rock from afar using a pebble or ball. The game's loser had to close their eyes and carry the victor until they managed to touch the same rock with their hands.
Όταν ηλικιωθώ, έμπορος έσομαι, και άπανος
For a young Greek woman, marriage was the culmination of their induction into society. The average life expectancy for women was about 40 years, so most marriages took place when the bride was 14 or 15 years old. The marriage did not require her consent either. Instead, she was passed on from the protection of her father to that of her husband. Married women were not technically citizens at the time and lacked the rights that came with official citizenship. However, they did receive a dowry that only they were allowed to spend. But in the event of a failed marriage, the dowry was returned to the bride's father. After the marriage was consummated, the woman's status changed from being a maiden to a bride. She remained a bride until the birth of her first child, wherein she officially became a woman. Women living in ancient Greek cities were essentially forbidden from participating in political life, and most aspects of their lives were controlled by men. Their most important responsibilities were running the household and giving birth to children, preferably boys. Most of the time, women's excursions outside of the house were limited to visiting other female neighbors, as per custom. The few exceptions to this strict rule were weddings, funerals, and religious festivals involving women in prominent public roles. Making textiles was the main occupation of most Greek women. It was a woman's responsibility to manufacture clothing for each of her family members, as well as to weave other household textiles. Women with exceptional weaving skills were believed to make excellent wives, and weaving in general was seen as a very attractive quality. For example, Homer describes Odysseus's devoted wife Penelope as spending most of her days weaving at the loom. Similarly, many Greek vases depicting women weaving were combined with images of a woman holding a veil, which was seen as the symbol of a bride. Ancient Greek women cooked in their house's kitchen area. However, since their cooking equipment was small and portable, they also sometimes prepared meals in the central courtyard. This was also where women performed other domestic activities. These activities were rarely seen by visiting men or passers-by, because the architecture of classical Greek houses facilitated the social norm that women should never be seen at work. The historian Strabo relays that the Temple of Aphrodite was one of Corinth's most famous landmarks. This was largely due to the temple's female patrons. These hetairai, as they were called, were donated to the goddess by both men and women. According to Strabo, the Temple of Aphrodite contributed greatly to Corinth's wealth. The hetairai were the temple's main attraction, and many visitors came to Corinth in search of their company, for which they spent frequently and frivolously.
Hello again, Wanderer. I hope your visit was an interesting one. Greek women lived very restricted lives compared to men, but throughout it all, they held on to their strength and dignity. Is there anything else you'd like to do? Feeling up for a test? Excellent! Let's begin with an easier question. What was the name of the women's quarters in a Greek home? The Ireon was a temple dedicated to the goddess Hera. Try again. The Andron was actually the men's section of the house, where they held their symbosia. Try another answer. Correct. The Gynekon was where young girls spent their days weaving and spinning threads. On to the next question. The Corinthian temple said to employ the Hetera was dedicated to which god? No, the temple was not dedicated to Athena. Try a different answer. Correct. Aphrodite was the goddess of love and passion, so it's only fitting her temple served such an amorous purpose. We're almost done. Just one more question. What was the name of Odysseus' wife? Yes, Penelope was Odysseus' loyal wife, who kept at her weaving while waiting for her husband to return from war. You passed the test, Wanderer. Congratulations. Of course! Let's see what Greece has in store for you.
Okay, where are we now? Let's go. Excuse me.
Γιατί διαιωνίζομαι του ημί.
Καταδικαστέα είναι και αξίε το τραγωδοποιό. Τραγωδοποιός ως για τον υποκριτών λέγει.
Legends told of a beekeeper nymph, Melissa. According to myth, she was the very first to harvest honey. Along with her sister Andrastea, Melissa took care of a young Zeus on Mount Ida. The grateful Zeus gave unto bees a golden brown color and made them resistant to the weather. Melissa was also initiated to the mysteries of Demeter by the goddess herself. Unfortunately for Melissa, she was killed for refusing to reveal their secrets. Demeter's resulting anger was so great it provoked an epidemic that made clouds of bees from Melissa's body. The priestesses of the mystery cults in the Greek religion were often compared to bees and were called Melissae. In these mystery cults, the most revered goddesses were Demeter and her daughter Persephone, Chthonian goddesses symbolizing the return of the seasons. Many honey offerings were presented to these so-called Chthonian divinities. The priestesses of the Artemis of Ephesus were also called Melissae. According to the ancient Greeks, honey was thought to have supernatural characteristics since it wasn't fully understood how it was formed. To them, it was a hidden treasure approaching the divine world and was highly symbolic. The bee and honey were thus part of the daily life of the Greeks. Poets celebrated the sweetness of it, its purity and aroma, and naturalists like Aristotle and Pliny the Elder described the manners of bees. It's known that Minoan Greece produced honey, so the knowledge of honey goes back to early Greek antiquity. It was popular for bees carrying pollen to be represented on jewelry. Hesiod and Homer mention honey, bees, and beehives in their works. Virgil consecrated an ode to beekeeping in his Georgics, describing honey to be a sweet present from the heavens. Raising bees was also a job, and the products that came out of it could even be used as trading currency. For example, Corsica paid a tribute in wax and honey to the Etruscans. With the production of honey, the Greeks developed new culinary dishes and pharmacopoeia. Of course, you gotta deal with all the little buzzing. Chickens were brought to Greece by the Persians during the Persian War. Huh. Interesting. Does his best to live up to Hephaestus. Philosopher, scientist, and mathematician. Big into triangles. Elected leader of Athens, a great political mind and beloved by his people. Fictional. Leader of a rebellion and proficient huntress, she is always ready to fight for her people. Average Athenian woman, excels at weaving, longs to get out of the house more often. Let's play as Pericles for a bit. Pretty smart for his age. The architecture of each city, town, and village reflects both its location's biome and the building material readily available. For example, Argos, capital of Argolis and known as the White City, is constructed from marble. Shown is a variety of concept art by Hugo Puzzuoli, Miguel Bucard, and Caroline Susi depicting the types of buildings and structures the hero will encounter in the game. The variety of heights, sizes, and spacing is important to keep the locations navigatable during gameplay. Like most Greek cities, there is a clean distinction between rich and poor, with muddy streets and low, ramshackle houses leading into stone structure, clean roadways, and plenty of vegetation. Black and white line sketches by Miguel Bucard of multiple temples and residential villas show the raised steps and intricate walkways between buildings, as well as the ruins of an old temple. Go, Pericles! Excuse me. The Hydra? Heracles' second labor was to kill the Lernaean Hydra, a water monster with numerous poisoned heads that lived in Lake Lerna of Argolis. One of the heads was immortal, and for each head that was chopped off, 2 more would generate in its place. The number of the heads was reportedly between 6 and 50. In order to kill the Hydra, Heracles needed the help of his nephew, Iolaos. As Heracles cut off its heads, Iolaos cauterized the wounds to prevent them from growing again. To cut off the immortal head, Heracles used a golden sword given to him by Athena. After his victory, he dipped his arrows in the Hydra's poisonous blood, having the instinct that they would come in handy for his upcoming labors. Or if you go by the Disney version, he dropped a mountain on it. I'm just gonna come up here and get these now while I'm... The sixth labor of Heracles was to kill the birds that lived in Lake Stiphalia in Arcadia. These birds were sacred to the god of war Ares. They were carnivorous with toxic dung and were made of bronze. The lake where they made their dwelling was swampy, so it was difficult for Heracles to approach them. To help, Athena gave him a rattle made by Hephaestus, the god of metalworking, which scared the birds off. Heracles managed to shoot some of the birds with his poison arrows, but several flew away. Come on, horse. Oh, hey, Callisto. Greek myth is full of stories and impressive animals that are separate from godlike creatures of Medusa and the Minotaur, such as the Nemean lion, the golden hind of Artemis, and the Cephalian birds. No foray into classical Greece would be complete without these legendary creatures. These are strong, powerful animals chosen for their interesting fighting style and appearance. The Odyssey team adapted the real-world versions, embellishing them with different markings and natural weapons. They are dangerous, scarred from many previous encounters, and have an almost diseased, unnatural air to them as shown in the concept artwork by Gabrielle Blaine. They are not to be attacked lightly. The 12 labors of Heracles were depicted many times in the game in various forms. For instance, the hunt of mythical animals is inspired by many of those myths, as well as some of the stonework and paintings that can be found across the game. I beat you all. Okay, let's get back to town. Where are you going? We can dismount for now. The region of Argos was a major center of civilization beginning in the Mycenaean period. In the Archaic and Classical period, the entire region was under the control of Argos. The banner depicts a wolf's head, the main coinage of Argos. The wolf, Lukos in ancient Greece, refers to Apollo like Chaos, who was an important secretary and who had an important sanctuary in his name. In Argos, wolves were offered as sacrifices to Apollo. These detailed frescoes adorn the walls of residential houses, villas, gymnasiums, bathhouses, boats, temples, and pretty much any other surface in the game. These sketches by Ubisoft artists show just a tiny selection of the frescoes found in Assassin's Creed Odyssey. It's amazing just how much detail goes into making games these days. Sorry. Hephaestus. Hephaestus was the god of metalworking, and the patron god of blacksmiths, goldsmiths, carpenters, craftsmen, artisans, sculptors, and architects. His workshop was believed to be situated either on Mount Olympus or on the island of Lemnos. In the latter case, the volcano Moschylos of Lemnos was believed to spew fire from the god's subterranean workshop. Hephaestos' name was closely associated with fire. For example, during the Trojan War, when the river Scamandros tried to drown the great hero Achilles, Hephaestos burned the riverbanks and the entire nearby plain until the river boiled like a kettle. Because of his occupation as a coppersmith, Hephaestos was usually depicted as having strong arms fit for wielding hammers and tongs, but weak legs due to his constant standing in front of the anvil. However, other versions of Hephaestos' story state he was born lame. Yeah, and in some versions he has like 2 robots that help him walk around. The ancient Greeks and Romans had a long history of making bronze statuary. Images of gods and heroes, victorious athletes, statesmen, and philosophers were prevalent throughout antiquity, appearing everywhere from temples and sanctuaries to public spaces. However, bronze statues had a high material value, and it is estimated that even a small-scale bronze statue would have cost around 150 to 200 drachmae in the 4th century. As a result, only the prosperous could afford to dedicate bronze statues to sanctuaries, while poorer pilgrims could only offer clay vases and statuettes. Well, this is a lot of bronze. Let's do the tour. Tell me about bronze work.
Welcome to Argos, traveler. I have always admired the dedication of Greek metalworkers. Without them, we would not have the inspiring monuments that stir the hearts of Greek citizens everywhere. This is Argos, one of the oldest cities in Greece. The Argives were an ingenious people, famous for innovations in areas like military tactics. However, what they were most renowned for was their metallurgic artistry, especially with bronze. I hope you enjoy yourself. Look for me at the end of your visit.
The area that would become Argos was inhabited as early as the 3rd millennium BCE, but it was in the 7th century BCE that it officially became a city-state. One of Argos's major pillars was its metallurgical industry. As far back as the 8th century BCE, the city was famed for making products like long dress pins and tripod cauldrons, as well as impeccable body armor. In addition to their technical excellence, the Argives were also creative, as seen in their masterful bronze sculpting, which became prominent in the city during the 6th and 5th century BCE. Bronze is an alloy composed of 90% copper and 10% tin. Because of this, copper and tin needed to be smelted and combined to create the material needed for sculpting. After the bronze alloy was formed, it was melted in special furnaces. They required a tremendous amount of fuel and were usually supplied with charcoal made from specific types of wood. It's possible they were also coated with a protective lining of clay, which would have been sensible given the melting point of bronze is approximately 950 degrees Celsius. Once the bronze was melted and collected, the furnaces were dismantled and dumped. In the 8th century BCE, most small-scale statues were molded using a complicated and lengthy method called solid lost wax casting. From the 7th century BCE onwards, metalworkers adopted the more efficient hollow lost wax casting. At its core, this process involved using sculpting models from wax, making molds over these models, then filling the molds with bronze to produce the desired shapes. The process was advantageous because it saved on materials, produced lighter statues, and reduced the chance of possible defects. Once all the pieces of the sculpture were molded, they were welded together and subjected to the cold working process. This process involved repairing the sculpture's flaws by filling any holes and cracks with specifically measured bronze patches. Afterwards, the sculpture was scraped, chiseled, and polished until it was deemed satisfactory. Decorative details like hair, eyebrows, and mustaches were added with the use of a sharp tool. Eyes, which could be inset with ivory, glass, or silver, were attached to their sockets using a resinous kind of glue. Teeth and fingernails were inlaid with silver, and lips and nipples with copper. These small touches added color and contributed to the sculpture's lifelike appearance. Bronze sculptures have a long and varied history in Greece. During the geometric period of 900 to 700 BCE, the sculptures mainly depicted idealized heroes, charioteers, and horses, and most of them were dedicated to sanctuaries. The Orientalizing period followed in the 7th century BCE. During this time, Greeks began adopting sculpting techniques from the East, and the depicted statues expanded to include mythological creatures like griffins and sphinxes. The Archaic period saw statues that reflected a better understanding of human anatomy, which eventually culminated in the realistic and powerful human sculptures of the Hellenistic period. Argos was the home of Polykleitos, one of the most famous sculptors in ancient Greece. His works, like the Doryphorus and Diadomenos, as well as his treatise on sculpting called the Canon, had a massive impact on the art as a whole, particularly in regards to ideal body proportions. Sadly, the original versions of Polykleitos' sculptures have been lost, along with most bronze statues from antiquity. As time went on, many bronze statues were melted down to be recycled in things like weapons, ammunition, and even church bells. Because of this, marble copies from the Roman period are our best evidence of the masterpieces of Greek sculpture.
I see you have completed your tour. I trust you have a new appreciation for Greek sculptures after learning of the heart and soul that was poured into each step of their creation. Now, what else would you like to do? Then let us dive right in. Here is your first question. Which era of sculpting came first? Correct. The geometric period lasted from 900 to 700 BCE and mostly featured small-scale statues and statuettes of heroes and horses. On to the second question. Bronze was an alloy composed of which two metals? Yes. To get the bronze required for sculpting, metal workers first needed to smelt copper and tin. One last question for you. Which renowned sculptor was a native of Argos? Yes, Polykleitos was based in Argos and had an enormous impact on the art of sculpting. You've done well, traveler. Your knowledge of metalwork is astounding. And so, your quest for knowledge continues. Follow me.
Heading over to Naxos first. Oh, Naxos is its own region, huh? Ah, it's up there. Okay. There's all these little islands. Then there's Andros. No fast travel to this place. How am I supposed to get there? This way. Nice catch. The banner of Delos is inspired by the coin of the island. According to mythology, Delos was the birthplace of Apollo, and along with Delphi, it was the major center of his cult. Apollo is a multifaceted god. He is the god of music, poetry, arts, oracles, light, knowledge, and more. He's often represented on coins with musical instruments, such as the kithara on this bronze coin from Delos. The Pythian games of Delphi also include musical events in honor of Apollo. This round body of water is one of the main features of Delos' landscape. In antiquity, those who fished in it risked punishment. Look at that blue. Oh. Come on, there you go. Farms aimed to be self-sufficient, a goal that was not always easy. Crop management required various strategies to alleviate the risk of crop failure and ensure the long-term productivity of arable land. Wheat crops failed due to insufficient rainfall every 1 in 4 years, while barley crops failed every 1 in 10. To mitigate crop failure, farmers planted small plots to exploit climate variations. In addition to cereals, they also cultivated vines for wine and olives for oil, and planted fruit trees and vegetables. Herms, rectangular pillars with head, were commonly placed as protectors of sanctuaries, crossroads, and public areas. Huh. How do I get here? Is there a boat nearby? Come on, you. Oh boy. Well, there's gotta be like a boat or something I can take. That is over the edge. That is over the edge. Do I not have a breath meter? I don't think I do. It's gonna take a while. Halfway there. Oh, Pericles.
Whoa. Pericles?
Yep. I just swam all the way from that island.
Where are you, Athens?
I am on Andros. Right now.
What you learning about?
I'm going to see what this discovery site is.
You know about Athenian politics? Learning about the war against Persia?
Little bits and pieces here and there.
I love how even though this isn't technically part of the game, they still have all of the rootable trees.
Yeah, but you can't pick them up.
Yeah. Cyclops. Oh, this is the Bay of Nobody.
Yeah.
There, please. Invisible wall.
In Greek myth, the Cyclops is a member of a race of one-eyed primordial giants. They would hunt and kill humans, most notably Odysseus and his crew, so it is only fitting that our heroes should run into one. A huge humanoid with unparalleled strength, the Cyclops wields a mighty axe and is adorned with the bones, skulls, and claws of those he has slain. Artwork exploring the variations of this beastly foe are shown here, by artist Gabriel Blaine, including a moss-covered, forest-dwelling version and one painted with blue eyes. His shoulders and arms bristled with enemy arrows. The team had fun creating these, as Theory Dansuro explains. The first villain you meet is called the Cyclops, but he is only a one-eyed man. Then you meet a real Cyclops. Surprise! Okay, let's go to Samos quickly. God.
Sneeze at a key moment.
Yeah.
Wow.
It belongs in a museum.
I love indie.
Nice backflip.
I love it. Rally.
Μεγαλώνει και πολιώνει με. Φωνία και θηροκτώνε, φυλαγρώτη και λυτηρία.
What inspired me was the way historians and archaeologists found out about the color that the Greek artists would use on their creations. Before working on this project, I always thought that the artists of the classical age would leave the marble uncolored. By using ultraviolet light, archaeologists were able to debunk what we thought to be true. The colors revealed by this process were dazzling and bright, exactly the opposite of what I would have expected them to be. Yep, and then we go over to Naxos, and then we can go back to Kos.
Did you get all the ones on the mainland?
On what?
The mainland?
No, but there are a bunch of tours I still have to do there. So I'm just trying to go around region by region,
Okay.
or whatever. Like if there's a bunch by a tour, I'll go collect them. But yeah, this is mainly just to unlock different characters to play as.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Play as in quotation marks?
Like Pericles here.
Like Cassandra? Oh wait, she's supposed to be the main character.
Yep. Cassandra, Alexios. Pythagoras.
It is fairly obvious that they designed it with, like the original design was a man,
Mm-hmm.
and then they switched to women.
Mm-hmm.
Like they adapted fairly well, but there are points of it where you're just like, this makes a lot
Yeah,
of
this is
sense.
obviously not for, yeah. Which still kind of irks me.
Hopefully they do better with Valhalla.
Valhalla is a woman.
Yeah, hopefully they do better. Because again, so far all of the imagery they've shown for it features a man.
Yeah, because they aren't confident that women can sell.
Tomb Raider.
Ow!
The lion was chosen for the banner of Samos, as it is a frequent image of ancient Greek iconography. A lion scalp was the emblem of the coinage of Samos. This lion's head was specifically related to Heracles' task of killing the Nemean lion. This legendary lion ravaged the plain of Argos, and had skin so thick that Heracles couldn't kill it with his arrows. The hero chose instead to strangle it. The battle against the Nemean lion symbolized combat against savagery and barbarism, and became the model of athletic fighting, a very popular event of the Olympics.
That's right, boys. Wrestling. She was singing one of your sea changes.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's where they are.
Heracles does a backflip in that.
Yeah, it's like, you're pretty spry for your age.
Ooh, man.
I mean, I just swam across the ocean, the sea.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. You can't get hurt in this discovery thing, so I literally had no breath meter. I literally just swam.
Nice. I shouldn't go out this far, but this is how you're supposed to get to the island.
I know, that's the thing. It's like I went over there I was riding along, thinking, okay, there'd probably be a boat. I'm suddenly on the edge of a cliff. Oh, that's the edge. That's the edge. That's the edge. And I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna swim.
I do like how this version of the database also sprinkles in like how they design things
Yeah.
based on history and stuff like that.
Yeah. It would be nice if we had actual like entries on like the historical people, but like sprinkled throughout the game as the story progresses, but it's nice. And again, you get to actually stop and look at the world more. So I don't know, maybe if they did like kind of like a hybrid, like, you get like Sean's database entries as you go through the game and stuff, but then you also have this tour option too.
Yeah, the tour being more in depth.
Yeah, the tour it could go more in depth and stuff.
Excluding, the Assassin's Creed storyline.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing, like, you do get some stuff about people, but it's all in terms
But there are no,
as cultists.
yeah, there's no like actual thing based solely on Pericles. In Naxos, ancient quarries were located on the Agios Ionis hill on the north side of the island, with another one in the central region, Melanes. In general, the quarrymen exploited natural fissures and applied pressure to extract massive blocks. They then drilled holes into the marble, drove wooden shafts into the holes, and poured water over the wood so it swelled and split off the desired blocks of stone. In Naxos, whiter parts of the stone were preferred during the quarrying process, which had a direct impact on the price of their marble. Around 5,000 cubic meters of the most prestigious Naxian marble was exported annually. The workers carried the marble with cranes and rails. They moved it around with pulleys, cranes, levers, rails, and inclined planes. Simple machines. Look at this roll. Greek soil contains great geological diversity. Since the beginning of the early Cyclopic period, the Greeks used marble in architecture, sculpture, figurines, and more. The word marble, from the Greek term marmaros, means resplendent stone. It quickly became a luxury furniture in Greek cities, and it played a big part in the Greek economy. Some regions stand out for their marble-related wealth, including Naxos, Pyros, Thasos, Attica, the Peloponnese, and Euboea Island. Marble is made up of different colors, red, pink, and yellow, and each has a different texture, translucent, wavy, streaked, swirly, etc. For example, Peloponnesian marble was red with touches of black. Pentelic marble, found near Athens, was greenish with a grainy pattern. The most prestigious marble of the time came from Paros and was grayish white. Marble has different tints. Naxos was the largest island in the Cyclades. Its protective deity was Dionysus, god of wine, who was born on the island according to mythology. The money of Naxos served as model for the banner, and is linked with the god as the coins show a cantharos, wine cup. Naxos produced wine, but was more famous for its marble. It was exported and widely used. For example, it was used in Olympia and on the Acropolis in Athens. Its craftsmen were pioneers in the development of monumental marble sculptures and architecture. Excuse me. Lots of people gathering here. The ancients often made bees and honey into symbols related to the deities. Honey was considered heavenly since it never expired, and was a typical offering placed on altars for the gods. These offerings were given to rustic deities such as Pan and Priap, who were protectors of beekeepers, but also to Chthonian deities worshipped in mystery cults such as Hermes, Dionysus, and Demeter. Honey and bees were also a symbol of resurrection. Honey was considered a gift, a remnant of the Golden Age, that the gods kindly gave to men. It guaranteed long life and good health. In this way, it was connected to nectar and ambrosia, drinks of the immortal gods. In childhood, Zeus was nourished with honey and milk. Mead was seen as a substitute for these divine drinks. Honey's religious symbolism was all the more important since it could be food for newborns. A young Plato was said to be fed with honey, but also for the dead. No napkins. In ancient Greece, war provided an income for the poor but was an expense for the rich. Hippocratic School of Medicine. The Asclepiades, the most famous being Hippocrates, practiced at the medicinal school of Kos. They were said to be the descendants of Asclepios, passing knowledge down through the generations. Hippocrates is the most famous physician of antiquity and is often called the father of medicine. He was born in the island of Kos in 460 BCE and was a member of the Asclepiades, an aristocratic family that passed their medicinal techniques from generation to generation. He had two sons named Thessalos and Dracon. Hippocrates left Kos early in his career to become a traveling physician. According to his biographers, he once went to the city of Abdera to cure the philosopher Democritus of madness. Another anecdote says he was asked by the Persian king Artaxerxes to cure a plague decimating his army. Unfortunately for the king, Hippocrates refused to help an enemy of Greece, no matter how much gold he was offered. Hippocrates died in Thessaly at around the age of 85. He enjoyed a great reputation among his contemporaries, and Plato even credited him with inventing the scientific method. Perfume was often considered to be manifestations of the gods' divine presence, and using or offering incense and perfume was believed to be a way of communicating with the gods. The Athenian assembly burned aromatics at the start of each session to invoke deities, in the hopes that they would inspire citizens to speak. Perfume was also burned on the altars that populated various sanctuaries, and statues of the gods were anointed with perfumed oils. But perfume wasn't the only scented substance with sacred uses. Gardens, as well as crowns of flowers and garlands, ensured that temples always smelled exceptional. Gods were also associated with specific flowers and plants. For example, Apollo was honored with olive branches, and Aphrodite was linked with roses, myrrh, and apples. The Greeks created a bodily hygiene and beauty culture in which the use of fragrances was very important. Both men and women used perfume in their bathing rituals, and good hosts always made sure they treated their guests to a bath and perfume session. Men also anointed their bodies after exercising, and it was unheard of for a man to go to the gymnasium without bringing his flasks of perfume. The art of making perfume was part of the field of medicine in antiquity. Certain resins and odorous substances were believed to have therapeutic effects, and the same ointments used in body care could also be used for healing purposes. In the 1st century CE, the famous pharmacologist Dioscorides even began his treatise De Materia Medica with a list of aromatic plants, perfumed oils, and unguents. Hey, Marcos.
Ah, my friend, I see you followed your nose to this lovely perfumery, perfume yard, perfactory? Yes, let's go with perfactory. A word of advice from a former perfume peddler. Never start your sales pitch with, "You smell like you could use some perfume." It has a surprisingly low success rate. This sensuous little island is where perfume was produced. Your nostrils are in for a treat, unless you're allergic, in which case I could sell you a wonderful remedy for a very reasonable price. No? Okay then. I'll check in on you at the end of your visit. See you soon, my friend.
Perfume-making techniques were invented and perfected in Mesopotamia and Egypt, beginning in the 4th millennium BCE. By the time of the Mycenaean era, perfume played an important role in the Greek economy. Mostly reserved for kings, priests, and aristocrats in the beginning, it later became more widely available during the classical and Hellenistic periods. Greeks used perfume for more than just personal cosmetics. It also had sacred uses. For example, cults would sometimes anoint their god's statue with perfume, and it was also used during rituals like weddings and funerals. Food and wine could also be scented with perfume to add to a meal's presentation. The art of making perfume was part of medicine and pharmacology, and physicians devoted entire books listing the best perfume recipes. Perfume is made up of two main components: a greasy substance called an excipient, like vegetable oil or animal fat, and an odorous substance such as flowers and plants. For ancient Greeks, the most common excipient was olive oil. According to Theophrastus, however, the most valuable oils were those extracted from nuts in the Syrian and Egyptian deserts. The odorous ingredient could be taken from a variety of sources. These include flowers like roses or lilies, herbs like oregano, spices like saffron, resins like amber, and leaves from plants. Some fragrances were also imported from outside of Greece, like Indian cinnamon and Syrian frankincense. These exotic scents were considered exceptionally precious. Mixing scent into the fatty excipient was called enfleurage, of which there were two methods. If the flour being used for the scent was fragile, the preferred method of extraction was cold enfleurage, which required an oil-soaked cloth. First, the cloth was rubbed against the flower's petals, saturating the oil with the scent. Then, the cloth was pressed to wring out the scented oil. Hot enfleurage involved heating the excipient before mixing in the scented substance. The hot enfleurage process consisted of heating and distillation. After the scented ingredients were dipped into heated oil, the mixture was then filtered before being pressed and decanted. Once the mixture was complete, spices, coloring agents and fixatives were added, along with preservatives to prevent the perfume from spoiling. Finally, the liquid was hermetically sealed in bottles, ready to be shipped to market. Perfume was usually bottled in ceramic or glass flasks, but more luxurious fragrances were contained in ornamented and painted flasks. Lekythoi and alabastra were elegant bottles designed for women, while arabaloi were used by athletes. It was common for the bottle's craftsmen to brand them to prevent frauds and knockoffs. Perfume shops were usually located in city centers, befitting of their importance. In addition to selling perfume, they were also sometimes used as meeting places. For example, the perfume shops near Athens' Agora were frequented every morning by the city's youth. The main purpose of perfume was to attract members of both the opposite and the same sex. We can trace this practice back to a scene in the Iliad, where Hera used perfume to seduce Zeus. Similarly, hymns about goddesses like Demeter and Aphrodite always mentioned their pleasant smell, further solidifying the belief that scent and seduction went hand in hand. However, perfume was also a mark of social status. Athletes covered themselves in perfumed oils during their training and at symposia, and citizens were judged based on how anointed, shiny, and perfumed their bodies were.
Hello again, my friend! I hope you see now how important perfume was, not only for aesthetic purposes, but for Greek social hierarchy. I wouldn't charge so much for my own bottles if I didn't know the value of what I was selling. What else can Marcos do for you? Good idea. Let's start with an easy question. Which of the following is an example of an excipient? Yes, olive oil makes a great excipient, and dressing, and medicine. Honestly, we pour that stuff on everything, including ourselves. And question 2. What is enfleurage? Correct. Enfleurage involved mixing the perfume scent into an excipient. We're almost done. Just one more question. In the Iliad, which goddess used perfume to seduce Zeus? Yes, Hera poured the saucy scent on herself to get her husband's attention. You did it! You've completed the test! Your wish is my command. Follow me.
Where to now?
Ως γέγηθα ατεωρών σε. Αληθές είστε. Κατανοώ ότι θέλεις να συναντήσει με οίκη. Όμως γάμος είστε.
Oof, we got a lot in Laconia. Well, they're all kind of centered around here. Compared to Athens, Sparta has been subject to far less archaeological work, and its Acropolis and Agora have not yet been excavated. As a result, it's difficult to put together a complete picture of ancient Sparta. The Athenian general and historian Thucydides gives the earliest description of Sparta, but it's Pausanias' visit to the city in the 2nd century CE that provides most of the knowledge we have today. The original layout of Sparta is difficult to map because in Thucydides' time, the city did not have any defensive walls. This is partially because Spartans viewed fortifications as frivolous, expensive, and unnecessary. They felt their men could do a better job defending the city than any walls could. Sparta! We're about to find out.
The kings.
Welcome, visitor, to where Spartan boys become Spartan men. My name is Leonidas. I am a king of Sparta. But do not think me some idle aristocrat softened by luxury. When Spartans go to war, I stand alongside them, shield to shield. And my spear tastes the same blood as those of my men.
Yeah.
It's got Leonidas talking to Pericles. That's a great image.
I can't help but be reminded of the boy I used to be. I wonder what that boy would think if he saw me today. Would he be proud? Intimidated? Or would he pity the tired old man standing in front of him? But such thoughts are meaningless. Let us move on. The Argogi was Sparta's strict education system. The strenuous regimen took in the young boys and then reshaped them until nothing was left but the strength, intelligence, and resolve of a perfect Spartan citizen. I will find you once your visit has ended, and we will talk further. Until then, visitor.
Sparta was a Greek city located in the Peloponnese. It differed from other cities of the time in that it had no walls. Sparta originated as 4 neighboring villages: Patane, Limnes, Mezoa, and Cynosura, all of which shared the same political, military, and religious life. After 2 wars with the Messenians, the city's territory expanded even further. By the 5th century BCE, they allegedly controlled almost half of the Peloponnese.
Αλληλαφήγηση της ιστορίας γίγνεται με τα αλληλουχίας και το επιχείρημα αυτό καθ' αυτό εστί η ιστορία ταύτη. Ο Εχέφρον αναγνωρεί τούτο.
When Pausanias visited Sparta's Agora, he described the imposing Persian Stoa, a structure built to commemorate the Greeks' decisive victory over the Persians in the Greco-Persian Wars. The most prominent building in the marketplace is the Persian Stoa, so called because it was built from the spoils of the Medes. In time, they embellished it to the size and ornamentation which it is now. The columns are Persians of white stone, Mardonians, son of Gobryas, and others.
Σοφόκλης, άγια και φέρε πλειάδα πορευτών και παράσεις διενημήν μετασμάτων. Καλόν ανίοριστικόν.
The Agoge was the military training and education program undergone by Sparta's male youth. Grooming men for war was one of the city's main priorities. Boys began their training at the young age of 7 and completed it when they were 30. It has been said that Spartan infants were inspected for weakness shortly after birth. If they were deemed too sickly, they were thrown into chasms. However, this information remains unproven. The healthy boys were considered suitable for training. When they came of age, they were removed from their families and were placed into service of the state. Their education included subjects like reading, writing, and even music, but was mostly focused on tough military exercises meant to turn the boys into efficient soldiers. The Agoge was divided into 3 cycles. One for boys aged 7 to 12, one for adolescents aged 12 to 20, and one for men aged 20 to 30. Each cycle included different exercises for refining the body and mind. Sparta played a large role in defeating the Persians during the Greco-Persian Wars in the 5th century BCE. They held their king Leonidas' glorious death at the Battle of Thermopylae in particularly high esteem. Because Leonidas was killed in battle, Sparta believed he died a good death and showed incredible bravery, qualities to be held as a model for all Spartans. This idealized bravery was embedded in the city's collective memory and was the main quality people strove for in the Agoge.
According to Pausanias, the Dromos was used as a place for fort races and contained gymnasia as well. It was open to Sparta's citizens, who could also offer sacrifices on the nearby statue of Heracles.
The first cycle of the Agoge focused on boys aged 7 to 12. Each of the boys had shaved heads and wore light clothing. They walked everywhere barefoot, swam the Eurotas River all year long, slept on reeds, and participated in cult rituals for Artemis or Thea. The boys were grouped into herds, or agoli, and were supervised by older adolescents. Once they reached the age of 12, they entered the second cycle of the Agoge, which aimed to integrate them into the society of citizen soldiers. The Agoge's second cycle included boys aged 12 to 20. When they reached the age of 20, the young men were dubbed Erinyes and could officially serve as hoplites in the Spartan army. Until the age of 30, Spartan men lived in communal mess halls called Sysgenia. From the age of 22 onward, they were permitted to start a family, but 30 was viewed as a more appropriate age to get married. Spartan men served in the military until they turned 60, when they were designated as elders, or gerontes. However, many were known to continue serving anyway, such as King Archimedes III, who fought in the army until he was killed in battle at the age of 62. All adult male Spartans participated in communal meals called syssitia. The attending Spartans contributed different kinds of food on a monthly basis, in addition to a small sum of money to pay for meat. Each man was entitled to one portion of a meal, with the exception of the kings, who received 2 portions. Syssitia attendance was mandatory for every Spartan fortunate enough to be part of the group. The meals had great political significance. According to Xenophon and Plutarch, the syssitia was designed to foster a sense of equality between citizens. It also demonstrated the self-restraint and moderation of Spartan society. But in reality, the syssitia only increased the differentiation between the rich and the poor. Those who could not afford to contribute to the communal food not only missed their meals, but also lost their right of citizenship.
Your tour has ended. As you have seen, the Arogi was not for the weak or faint of heart, but it did its job in producing skilled warriors and shrewd citizens. What else would you like to do? So you think you are ready for a test? Very well. Let us see how you fare. First, a simple question. The Agogi was made up of how many cycles? Correct. The Agogi was divided into 3 cycles. One for boys aged 7 to 12, one for adolescents aged 12 to 20, and one for men aged 20 to 30. Next question. How many meal portions were kings entitled to at Syssitia? No. Although that was the allotted food for most Spartan citizens. Try again. Yes, Spartan kings had the right to double portions. One final question. When were Spartans allowed to grow mustaches? Yes. Once a Spartan man was over 30, he was allowed to adorn his face with a glorious display of manhood. Impressive, visitor. You should be proud. As you wish. Come this way.
Now where are we? Philippides was a hemerodrome, professional runner who served Athens as a herald. According to Herodotus, Athens sent Philippides to ask Sparta for aid at Marathon. During his journey, he encountered the god Pan in the mountains. Pan, who was half man, half goat, complained that the Athenians did not honor him as much as they should have, especially since he could render helpful services like sowing panic and terror in the ranks of their enemies. Following the Battle of Marathon, the Athenians corrected their neglectful attitude toward Pan and thanked him for his help in their victory. Hippias was the son of Pisistratos, the tyrant of Athens. He succeeded his father in 528 BCE, ruled with absolute power, and brutally disposed of his enemies. In spite of this, Athens was surprisingly peaceful and prosperous under Hippias' rule. His reign ended in 510 BCE, when a Spartan invasion of Attica led to his downfall. Hippias fled to Asia Minor, where he came in contact with the Persian king Darius. The disgraced tyrant would eventually convince the Persians to land their forces at Marathon. Realizing an enormous battle on the scale of ancient Greece warfare was quite a technical and design challenge. We wanted to remain as true as possible to the tactics and warfare of the time, but plenty of compromises were made for gameplay, excitement, and technical constraints. Even making the Discovery Tour was a challenge, as we needed to show battlefields without explicitly showing a battlefield. We opted for flags instead of violence to communicate the events. In Greece, hoplites were heavy infantrymen. They carried round shields large enough to protect both themselves and anyone to their left, and wore helmets, cuirasses, and leggings. Hoplites normally advanced in a phalanx formation of 5 to 7 lines deep. The phalanx allowed them to attack with spears and simultaneously defend themselves from any cavalry and archers attacking from the front. A tumulus is a special tomb in which the ashes of cremated bodies were collected in purple cloth, purple being the mark of royalty. The ashy remains were then placed in a bronze urn. There is a large tumulus in the Kerameikos that was used from the 560s BCE to the end of the 5th century BCE. Huh. Spartan general during the Peloponnesian War, a brave and intelligent fighter.
Welcome, traveler, to the site of the legendary Battle of Marathon. It's truly incredible that such a small place would have such tremendous significance. But then again, even the tiniest pebble can send ripples through the water. Marathon was the location of one of the greatest battles in Greek history. It was here where Athenians made a stand against the might of an imposing Persian fleet. Your visit will take you through the causes of the conflict, the battle itself, and its far-reaching consequences. I will see you again once you're through. Farewell for now.
In 490 BCE, 600 Persian triremes landed on a beach 35 kilometers north of Athens. Standing in their way were 11,000 hoplites led by the prestigious Athenian general Miltiades. The Persian forces outnumbered the Greeks approximately 5-1, and yet the smaller force managed to push back their would-be conquerors. The Battle of Marathon was a major turning point in the Greco-Persian Wars, and the Athenians' victory would be celebrated for many years. The modern-day distance-running event is named a marathon in memory of a soldier from the battle who ran back to Athens to announce their victory, though whether this is real or legend is uncertain. The Persians wanted to invade Greece in part due to its rich silver mines. In 545 BCE, they came closer to this goal after their victory over Croesus, the king of Lydia. The victory forced some Greek populations in Asia Minor to surrender and gave the Persians a solid foothold to carry out a large-scale invasion. In 494 BCE, the city of Miletus revolted against its Persian rulers. They were aided by Athens and the nearby city of Eretria, and even burned down an important Persian temple. The Persian king Darius was enraged by their sacrilege, and in 491 BCE, sent messengers to the Greek cities demanding their submission. Athens and Sparta killed the Persian messengers, goading Darius to invade. The Persians began their attacks, first capturing the city of Naxos and enslaving its inhabitants, then taking the city of Eretria. Filled with confidence from their string of victories, the Persians set their sights on Athens. The Greeks were surprised by the ferocity of the Persian attacks. Seeking aid against the upcoming invasion, Athens was forced to appeal to other cities for help. In a surprising move, they asked for aid from Sparta, known for having the strongest army in Greece. The Spartans agreed to the request, but they were unable to send reinforcements in time due to the religious feast of Apollo Carneos, which forbade them from leaving their city until the next full moon. The only extra help Athens managed to acquire was from the small Boeotian city of Plataea, which sent an additional 1,000 hoplites. This was the first time in Greek history that their entire civilization was under attack from an external invader. Despite sharing the same language and same religion, Greek city-states had often warred amongst themselves. The Persian invasion was the first time they realized the necessity of collective action to ensure their survival. The Persian fleet originally planned to land at the port of Phaleron. However, the exiled Athenian tyrant Hippias, who sided with the Persians, advised them to land at Marathon instead, where it would be easier to deploy cavalry. The Athenians were unaware of the Persian battle plans and left Marathon undefended. This allowed the Persians to quietly set up camp on the beach, while Athens scrambled to mount a defense. The Persians' overwhelming numerical superiority forced the Athenians to get creative with their defensive strategy. The city sent 10,000 hoplites, along with the extra 1,000 Plataean reinforcements, to a hill located above the Persian encampment. Once in position, Athenians had to decide whether to wait for the Persians to attack or to strike them first. Athens' strategists believed the former option was better, but the general Miltiades believed a first strike was more advantageous, as the Persians had their backs to the sea. In the end, Miltiades' opinion prevailed, and the Greeks made their move. According to Herodotus, the Greek forces charged at the Persians without archers or cavalry. The Persians were unprepared for what they saw as an act of madness. While they were able to hold the Greeks back at first, they were eventually pushed back to their ships and forced to retreat. The Persians suffered heavy losses during the battle, with approximately 6,400 casualties. The Athenians, on the other hand, only lost 192 soldiers. The victory at Marathon was considered miraculous. The Greeks attributed this miracle to the appearance of legendary heroes who they allegedly saw return from the dead to fight at their side in defense of the city. For example, several Athenians swore they saw the mythical King Theseus take up arms at Marathon, a scene which would later be depicted in Athens' Agora. Similarly, some hoplites attested that Heracles appeared at Marathon, clad in his lion's skin and wielding a club. The supposed appearance of these heroes helped elevate the Battle of Marathon to a legendary status among the Greek people. After the Persians fled Marathon, they tried to invade Athens by way of the Bay of Phaleron. However, this gave the Athenians time to return to their city and mount a proper defense. Fearing further losses, the admiral of the Persian fleet called off their attack, and the Persians returned to their empire. Darius was furious at the campaign's failure and decided to seek vengeance in a retaliatory expedition from both land and sea. Meanwhile, Sparta begrudgingly congratulated Athens on their victory. The victory at Marathon marked the beginning of a new era for Athens. According to Herodotus, Athens' success at pushing back the Persians ranked them first in the ongoing competition between the Greek city-states. The Athenians immortalized their prestige by erecting monuments in both their own city and in Delphi. The Battle of Marathon was also perceived as a blow against tyranny. Tyranny went from being perceived as a simple flaw in authoritarian excess to major treason against the homeland, a sin that rulers would take great pains to avoid being accused of. This helped consolidate the institution of democracy for the next 2 centuries.
I hope you enjoyed this look into the famous Battle of Marathon. It was not only a major turning point in the history of Athens, but also for all of Greece. Its repercussions would be felt for many years to come. Is there anything else you'd like to do? Of course. Let's start with a simple question. Which Athenian general led the Greek forces at Marathon? Correct. Miltiades led the forces at Marathon, and it was his strategy that helped the Greeks push the Persians back. Time for another question. Which Greek city revolted against the Persians in 494 BCE? No, I'm afraid Naxos was taken by the Persian fleet on their way to Athens. Try another answer. Miletus revolted against Persian rule, with support from both Athens and Eretria. One more question. Which other Greek city aided Athens at Marathon? Yes, Plataea sent 1,000 Oblides to aid the Athenian forces. Well done, traveler. You have learned much. Very well. Follow me closely, traveler.
The Greeks had always distinguished Europe, where they had settled, from Asia. They reckoned it began with the far side of the Aegean Sea and extended well beyond to Persia and India. But beyond pure geography, the Persian invasion gave a political significance to the distinction between Asia and Europe. Herodotus writes of two worlds, Asia, dominated by the Persian Empire, and Europe, by which he actually means the Greek world. This is particularly notable at the time of the passage of the Dardanelles by the Persian army. While Greece is still a few hundreds of kilometers away, Herodotus quotes Xerxes as saying, "Let us enter into Europe after having prayed to the gods who reign over the land of the Persians." He passes radically from one world to another, from one civilization to the other. Texts described Asia as a barbarous country, but we must be careful that the word does not have the meaning of today. It simply means that the spoken language is incomprehensible to the Greeks, without implying a judgment of value. Salt harvesting was known to humankind at least from the Neolithic age, on account of the considerable quantities of cemented ceramic molds accumulated around salt springs. There are two main ways of collecting salt. The first one was to simply harvest it where it was accessible, that is, near salt lakes, marshes, or near the sea. Pans were used to let collected water evaporate in the sun and then harvest the resulting salt. The other method was extracting it from the earth. This was difficult in mainland Greece since the soil did not provide much yield in this fashion. Collecting salt from water was therefore the more utilized method. We know for sure that salt played a role in magic. For example, eating salty cakes on a special day was thought to allow young girls to dream of their future husbands. It was also used in some religious practices. Even in Homeric times, salt was offered to the gods and used when sacrificing animals and making libations. Furthermore, salt played an important part in some Greek festivals, such as the Eleusinian Mysteries, celebrated in the town of Eleusis in Attica to honor Demeter, the goddess of the crops, and her daughter Persephone. The banner of Locris shows a griffin, a mythological creature with the body, legs, and tail of a lion, and the head and wings of an eagle. The griffin is inspired by the Locris Opunti coinage, which depicted Ajax, the Locrian hero of the Trojan War. His shield bore a griffin on the interior side. Griffins were known for guarding treasure, especially if it belonged to the gods, and were a symbol of strength and vigilance. Come on, you can climb that. Whoa, 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 whoa. Oh, hey, Herodotus. The Greco-Persian Wars incited the Greek Herodotus from Asia Minor to write the first works of a new literary genre, history. At the beginning of his book, Herodotus writes, Herodotus exposes here his research so that what men have accomplished does not fade from memory, those great and wonderful exploits accomplished by both barbarians and Greeks. The word research was previously used only in medicine to describe the search for the causes of a disease. It then came to designate a new intellectual construction, history, in the current sense of the word, highlighting the need for rigor and objectivity. Since the 5th century BCE, it's thanks to the histories of Herodotus that we're able to understand the deeds of Sparta at Thermopylae. Way to go, buddy. Upon the arrival of the Persians, the terrified Delphians consulted the oracle of Apollo. They were told to address their prayers to the winds, as they would be Greece's most powerful ally in the coming conflict. Xerxes' campaign did indeed rely heavily on coordination between land and sea forces advancing in unison. During the Battle of Thermopylae, a storm cost the Persian sea armada many of its ships. Over 400 vessels were destroyed. In calm weather, these ships would likely have forced the Greeks to fight in a tactical retreat, letting Xerxes land troops south of Leonidas' position and bypass Thermopylae entirely. The cooperation of the winds led the Athenians to later construct a temple in honor of Boreas, the wind god. Xerxes went to spectacular lengths to ensure the passage of his army from Asia Minor into Greece. For example, he made a bridge of boats to cross the Strait of the Dardanelles, 12 kilometers long. This bridge was barely finished when a storm destroyed it. Furious, Xerxes ordered that the sea be punished with 300 lashes, and that chains be thrown to the bottom of the ocean to better restrain it. Xerxes also dug a canal at the entrance of the eastern peninsula of Athos, rounding the promontory of Athos, which has a height of more than 2,000 meters, can prove extremely dangerous in the event of a storm, as shown by the catastrophe that struck a Persian fleet in 492 BCE. Xerxes had a channel of some 2 kilometers long constructed, using detachments of all the peoples of the army and by the inhabitants of the region who dug under the threat of the whip. Herodotus saw it as a manifestation of pride more than a work of public utility. It would have sufficed, he said, to build a kind of wooden rail on which the vessels would have been drawn, as was done for the Isthmus of Corinth. In the Iliad, Homer describes the struggles that broke out between friends and foes over who would lay claim to the remains of a fallen warrior. The death of Leonidas at Thermopylae prompted such a fight. Herodotus, who knew the Iliad well, was no doubt aware that he was repeating a well-known trope. He says that 2 sons of Darius fell in the fighting over Leonidas' corpse, and that a melee ensued between the Spartans and Persians. Leonidas' conduct at Thermopylae is comparable to the Homeric heroes of legend, and it's often suggested that this conflict is as important as the Trojan War itself.
Welcome, visitor, to Thermopylae. Thermopylae stirs many feelings in my heart. Rage at the Persians' arrogance. Regret that I could not do more. But mostly, I feel proud. Proud of my city, and of my men, who fought to protect the very soul of the Spartan people. For those few fateful days, they were my brothers. I miss them all. Thermopylae was where a courageous group of Spartans stood amongst other Greek soldiers and held off the forces of King Xerxes, the Persian. When you're done, find me and we'll speak more.
The Persian king Darius's cries of rage echoed for years after his humiliating defeat at Marathon. Even after Darius's death, his son Xerxes continued to seek vengeance against the Greeks. According to Aeschylus, Asia was emptied of all its men. Greek spies brought the news of Xerxes' imminent invasion back to their homeland. Afterwards, many discussions were had on the best place to mount a defense. In the end, the Greeks decided on Thermopylae. The area featured a narrow pass that could act as a bottleneck for the Persian army, negating their numerical superiority. It also offered naval advantages, offering the Greek fleets opportunities for flanking. 5,000 Peloponnesian Greeks set up at a fort near the entrance of the narrow passage, otherwise known as the Hot Gates. Leading them was Leonidas, a Spartan king who prided himself on supposedly being a direct descendant of Heracles. Leonidas was accompanied by several elite soldiers who together made up the famous 300 Spartans. The Persian army arrived in the summer of 480 BCE, preceded by a flood of rumors regarding their strength and numbers. It was claimed they consumed 6,000 tons of wheat every day, and that they dried every river and brook they passed to quench their near-insatiable thirst. During their march to Thermopylae, the Persians faced no opposition, and in fact, increased their numbers further by recruiting more soldiers from other Greek cities and places like Thrace. According to Herodotus, the last count of the Persian fleet was numbered at 1,207 boats, mounted by approximately 240,000 men. He estimates the land army, meanwhile, was made up of more than 1 million men. The Greek forces at Thermopylae were heavily outnumbered. Xerxes believed that at the sight of his massive army, the Greeks at Thermopylae would flee in terror. Instead, they deliberated. The majority of the Peloponnesians wanted to engage the Persians on the Isthmus of Corinth. Leonidas, meanwhile, believed it was wiser to stay put in Thermopylae. While the Greek forces debated, a Persian horseman was sent to spy on the enemy. He returned to Xerxes with surprising news. Not only were the Greeks not fleeing, but the Spartans guarding the fort were exercising and combing their hair. A far cry from the fearful soldiers Xerxes expected. To increase the pressure on the Greeks, Xerxes waited 4 more days, then attacked on the 5th. The Persians faced heavy resistance and suffered many losses, and Herodotus says Xerxes leaped 3 times from his chair, seized with fear for his army. The following day proved to be just as difficult for the Persian forces, and the Greeks continued to stand their ground. The Persians seemed poised to be held at Thermopylae indefinitely, until an inhabitant from the region came forward with information. He told the Persians of another route which could take them around Thermopylae. A Persian contingent was sent to verify the information. While there were Greek soldiers stationed to guard the route, they were forced to flee from the Persians. Thus, on the 3rd day of the battle, the Greeks were surrounded by their enemy. With the Persians both in front of and behind them, the Greek forces at Thermopylae realized they had 2 choices: flee to live another day, or stand and fight till their last breath. Most of the Greeks chose the former option, but some stayed, including Leonidas and his 300 Spartans. For the Spartans, dying a glorious death was one of the highest honors they could achieve. The few members of Leonidas's Spartans who did not participate in the last stand at Thermopylae felt that they had missed an opportunity for honor and either committed suicide or continued living under the mockery and disgust of their fellow citizens. The Spartans' last stand was not only for glory, though. Had they not held off the Persians, the Greeks' retreating forces would probably have been cut down by enemy horsemen. On the morning of the 3rd day, King Xerxes was assured of his victory. However, that victory did not come easy. King Leonidas himself fell in battle, and a furious fight broke out around his body. The Spartans fought to the last man, and when they had all been slain, Leonidas's body was brought before Xerxes. According to Herodotus, Persians usually honored the most courageous warriors, even if they were enemies. However, Xerxes was so consumed by rage at the Spartans' resistance that instead he cut off Leonidas's head and ordered it impaled on a stake. A statue of a lion was later erected on the hill of the Spartans' last stand in honor of Leonidas's bravery. though they were victorious, the Battle of Thermopylae shook the morale of the Persian army. They had lost thousands of men, while Greek casualties only numbered in the hundreds, and due to the sacrifice of the Spartans, the rest of the Greek army had been able to successfully retreat and regroup. As a result, even as Xerxes set up camp at the foot of Athens' Acropolis, ready to get revenge for his father's humiliating defeat at Marathon, the Persians were more anxious than confident. They were more aware than ever that the Greeks did not fear them and were ready to die defending their land. In the end, the Battle of Thermopylae was still a loss for the Greeks. However, the battle gave the Greeks a boost in morale that carried them all the way to their decisive victory over the Persians in the Battle of Plataea in 479 BCE. With the war against the Persians finally won, the Greeks were able to honor the sacrifice of Leonidas and his Spartans with memorials and poems, forever solidifying the glory of Sparta's military prowess. The newfound respect for Sparta was noteworthy, because before the war, the city was seen as no more than a bully who forced itself into the affairs of others. Thermopylae changed the opinions of Sparta for the better, and gave them a legitimate claim to be one of Greece's most powerful and influential cities.
You've finished. I hope you understand the magnitude of the sacrifices made at Thermopylae. Without them, the Greek people would have surely ended as a footnote in Persian history. Is there something else you'd like to do? If you think you're ready, let's begin. First question. Who was Xerxes' father? Yes. One of the main reasons Xerxes invaded Greece was to get revenge for Darius' defeat at the Battle of Marathon. Another question for you. Which battle is seen as the final victory against Xerxes' Persian forces? Correct. The Battle of Plataea helped put an end to Xerxes' invasion. One last question. How many Spartans fought at the Battle of Thermopylae? Yes, 300 of us stood against Xerxes' forces. You've done well, visitor. I have no more questions for you. Then let us not waste time. Follow me.
I see. Okay, how many... What do we got left? 5 and 9. I've done no politics and philosophy, no art and religion. I've done famous cities, and I'm about halfway through Battles and War. So 1, 2, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. About 15 left. Jeez. Which is we're at a symposium right now. Well, this is probably... Okay, I'm just gonna pick this one up since it's just out here. I'm gonna pick this up, and then we're probably gonna have to cut it here, because I've been going for a very long time. I've been doing all... In case you're wondering, all the discovery things I've done have been in just one session so far. And it's getting really late. I gotta stop and take a break. Well, I think I've done about half, maybe. See, I'm just gonna get this one discovery thing since it's just out in the middle by itself. And then we're gonna stop for now. I'll pick this up in a couple of days, or the next video for those of you. Hello, fellow Spartan. Potidae. The Peloponnesian War began over two main stories. One is the Athenians having entered into conflict with an ally of Sparta, the great city of Corinth, which had tried to take over one of Athens' allies, the city of Potidaea. The other is the so-called Megarian decree, which was passed by Athens in order to forbid all trade between Megara and the Athenian Empire. As a result, the Spartans called for a great congress in Sparta where they conferred with their allies. The Megarians were pushed toward war since they were greatly affected by the decree, and so were the Corinthians. The king of Sparta, Archidamos II, advised for a more cautious policy, trying to prevent the outbreak of the war, or at least to make sure that Sparta was better prepared to face the Athenians who ruled the seas in an open confrontation. The war that would ensure pit two essentially different powers and styles of warfare against each other. Sparta and her allies were based mainly in the Peloponnese, and their force consisted especially of land armies of hoplites. The only maritime power of this league was Corinth. The Athenians, on the other hand, had become a maritime power during the struggle against Persia, and remained so in the aftermath. So what is this? Battle of Amphipolis. But we're going to save that for later. Like I said, I've been going for let's just say a very long time. I need to take a break. And yeah, I'll be working for the next few days, so I probably won't pick this up for a while, but for you guys, it'll probably just be the next day that the video goes up, or it gets released, or whatever. So hopefully in the next session, we'll finish all the Discovery Tours, and then hoping to maybe start the DLCs next. Options. Where's my last save then? How do I save? Is there a way to save? I hope it's saved. I'm going to just check. I just want to check to see if it actually saved, or if it's automatic or not. Otherwise, I just wasted like 6 hours. Okay, looks like it did save. Yeah, we're good. Okay. See you next time, everybody.